Thanks everyone for joining me today. We're going to talk today about automating anything and everything. And specifically, we're going to talk about the automation landscape, which is just a fancy way of saying, what do we mean by automation and how do we use those tools that we're going to talk about to solve our problems? My name is Will Petterson. I am the VP of Customer Experience here at Decisions. I've worked at Decisions for the last 8 years. In that time, I have helped tons of our customers navigate their way through some of these problems, use some of these technologies, and solve their trickiest and hardest problems using Decisions. I currently run our training, our customer success, our account management, and our support teams here. So if any of you are current customers, you likely know me. And if you don't, please feel free to email me at will@decisions.com if you ever have any concerns. So here at Decisions, we sell a IPA platform. Decisions is a complete automation solution for Fortune 2000 financial services and healthcare companies. And our customers use the Decisions IPA platform to write applications and build automations. And these things fix customer experiences, modernize legacy applications, and they automate anything and everything in the business. A little bit of housekeeping before we kick off here. This is the second in a series of 3 webinars. Last month, we had our Director of Innovation, Jeff Ward, interview Jim Perry from Market Insights about improving time to market or in loan origination using business rules. And then in June, we have our co-founder and CTO, Keith Oderman, doing a deep dive on the what and why and how of process automation. We'll leave some time at the end of this for Q&A. Hopefully this will be about 25, maybe 30 minutes, and the remainder of that time we'll use for Q&A. Any other questions that might arise, please feel free to email sales@decisions.com. These webinars are available on our site, decisions.com as well. So what's our agenda for today? I'd like to do 3 things. First, I want to help you understand what the automation landscape looks like today. To do this, we need to talk a bit about what automation means, look at some of the technologies in detail, and then talk about what an automation strategy may look like. Specifically, what does investment in team organization look like for an automation strategy? With our terms defined, we will look at what's driving the adoption of these tools or this style of planning or this style of thinking. We'll look at the changing role of IT, look at access to software developer talent in the future, and then reassessing if robotic process automation or RPA is still the best horse to bet on. And lastly, we'll walk through some of our customer success stories and using our technology to solve some hard, tricky problems in the automation and application space. So let's start with, what do we mean by automation? Applications have long been the core building block of enterprise technology. We're familiar with terms like customer relationship management, CRMs, or enterprise like Salesforce, or enterprise resource programs like SAP or ERPs. And these are large, complex software applications that purport to handle domain-specific business needs. They do lots, right? That's the long and short of it. These are big, fat applications. But these applications often require substantial amounts of customization. And what we see in the customers that we work with is, while sometimes that customization is in the software itself, the customization is also in the process, in the contours of the business process that grows up around that software. And so the process is fit to the software, and the software is not fit to the process. So automation is the name given to a collection of diverse technologies that abstract out the features and functionality of underlying applications and make them accessible to a broader spectrum of users. Technologies like business rule engines, process mining, and RPA. You'll hear these, I'm referring to this as the automation toolkit. You'll hear Gartner refer to this as a digital ops toolbox. All of these technologies leverage low-code, no-code capabilities to engage non-traditional developers in the solution of business problems. This increases the ability for us to deliver new value by ensuring that subject matter experts are the one to do the work. and that we are not engaging IT to build the things that we need to build. We can increase our time to delivery, and we can better refine the processes if we can know and build the process. And that's what we talk about when we talk about automation. Automation is discussed under a series of terms today. Gartner is going to refer to this as hyperautomation. You'll hear Forrester call it automation fabric. We call it intelligent process automation here at Decisions. We expect that this area to continue to grow in the near future. By 2025, we think that 70% of business application development will be in low-code or no-code tools that in one or many of these technologies that make up the automation toolkit. So looking at automation a bit, automation again is a category covering a suite of tools we're calling the automation toolkit. So let's look at some of those technologies in a little bit more detail. So the problem with business logic today isn't just that we don't know what the logic that runs our business is, we don't know where it is. Business rule engines allow us to centralize logic, to get it out of the stored procedures, the web page, and the homegrown code that owns all of our business logic today. This simplifies the understanding of business logic because one user is now able to see all of the logic, all the business logic. And then because it's all centralized, business logic propagates across the organization immediately. These business rule engines process millions of transactions across billions of rules. They're high throughput and highly scalable. So they are high volume as well as centralized the management and execution of business logic. Process mining, sometimes also referred to as process discovery, applies data science to discover, validate, and improve processes through process analysis, variant exploration, and cost calculation functions. This lets us see and understand the actual processes we manage and understand where the bottlenecks are. And that allows us to continually improve by surfacing the most important data to our analysis teams. The long and short here is process mining is a data analysis tool. It ingests data, it builds models, and it gives a user interface to let to ease the burden of data analysis. It surfaces bottlenecks, hotspots. It lets you see the real process, not the process that you think your business process looks like. It shows you the dirt, so to speak, of the processes that we run. These processes can span multiple systems. They consume very simple, very generic log file data. It can be as simple as an Excel file with states, IDs, and timestamps. IBPMS, or Intelligent Business Process Management, is a suite of tools that are enhancing the traditional BPM tools that many of us are likely familiar with. They're using execution, modeling, and collaboration to empower the creation and refinement of the processes built in BPMN softwares. Really, the bit here, the significant piece here is that these are workflow tools that embed analytic reporting as well as event execution directly into the tool. So these are the tools that business analysts using low code, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, are using to build business processes, build and report on those business processes. Low code is less of a technology and more of an approach. In fact, all of the tools here in the toolkit we're talking about today to do what they need to do, which is engage this class of non-traditional developers, the business analyst user, requires low code. Low code is effectively table stakes for this type of these type of softwares. But low code is a name we give to a class of software, allowing knowledge workers to build out their own business processes. These use visual designers and integrated testing and deployment to increase the time to delivery for these users to build processes and integrations between their systems. And lastly, RPA is a technology that allows programmable computer robots to take over repetitive tasks for humans. This allows you to reduce errors in high data entry throughput situations. This is a place where a user is on their desktop entering in information in a data entry type task. You can program these robots to take that task over and do it repetitively with precision. If we look at all of these tools together, rules engines, process mining, BPMS, low code, and RPA, that gives us the automation toolkit. Again, Gartner calls this hyperautomation. Forrester calls this the automation fabric. I'd be remiss to not call out here today, since I work for Decisions, that our Decisions IPA platform does many of these things today extremely well. So now that we've talked about what automation is, the other terms people call it, and we've talked a bit about the technologies that comprise it, let's talk a bit about what an automation strategy might look like. An automation strategy, what is an automation strategy and how does it differ from an IT strategy? People much fancier than me would say things like, it's a shared strategy across departments and initiatives. It's the orchestration of effort across delivery teams. And it's a governance approach to balance innovation and coordination. In short, it's a strategy that engages business technology users to solve the problems that they know the most about, instead of directly engaging with IT. But just because business is the leader here or the owner or is the plan setter doesn't mean that these processes, these programs avoid the best practices, the learnings, and the structures and investments of traditional IT programs. Let's stop here for a second and look at an example. If we were going to roll out a new CRM or ERP solution, we would build a supporting cast around that rollout and then the maintenance of those applications as we use them going forward. We would treat CRMs and ERPs as business critical, and then we would put developers, system admins, QA, project management resources, solution architecture, UX designers in the appropriate places to ensure that our Salesforce or our SAP implementations are both successful from an implementation standpoint, as well as successful from a management standpoint. What we often see in companies that don't have an automation strategy is that they have a middling or minimum investment in automation. So if we just think about some of the roles that we see in an automation solution or in an automation program, we'll have developers and maybe a project manager, or maybe we'll have analysts and some solution architects working together. We won't have as defined of a process. Our understanding of what this endeavor takes won't be as refined. And as thus, we're likely to open up the possibility for our automation projects to fail. And they'll fail not necessarily because of technology limitations, or the capabilities of this toolkit we're talking about here are substantial. We'll fail because we haven't invested appropriately in the team or teams that are going to do this work. So the way that I like to think about this is, if we treat automation with the same level of import and business criticality as we do ERP and CRM, we will, by nature, invest appropriately in that solution. And so what we need to think about here is, and the question you should ask yourself if you're exploring automation is, am I elevating automation to the same level of import as ERP and CRM to my business? And if the answer is no, then the question becomes, well, what am I doing today? And so this is where we start thinking about automation maturity or digital maturity more generally. How far along are you on establishing the right process? Are you piloting projects as a beginner? Do you have multiple initiatives that are uncoordinated, causing you to fall into an intermediate state? Or are you in advanced, where you have centralized, but you have centralized governance, but discrete teams operating across the business? If we dive in a bit about our beginner, is IT piloting a single technology from the toolkit? Are they looking at a BPMN solution? Are they looking at process mining solution? Are they looking at that solution in a silo as needing a specific technology to solve a specific problem? Have they not moved into thinking about automation more generally in its transformational potential? Is IT running the program? Are software developers using the program and giving your business users feedback or business stakeholders feedback about if the quality of that technology is good or not? Moving up a bit, looking at an intermediate state. Do we have multiple projects in flight, but no coordinated plan? Have we started to set up teams, but those teams don't have a consistent structure? They don't have a consistent reporting location. Are we using a set, but not all of, or subset, but not all of the tools in our automation toolkit? Are we using business rule engines and process mining, but not making use of RPA technologies? Right? How fully fleshed out is our strategy? And then if we look at an advanced or mature organization, what we see is there's discrete teams. These teams have a consistent focus. There's people that solicit work from the business that they reside in. There's the developers that do the work. Just to be clear, these are low, not necessarily, but almost a majority of these would be kind of low code developers. Are there QA teams, or is there a QA function to ensure that new work is delivered up to spec and that changes don't cause any breakage? Do we have solution architecture either embedded directly in the team or available as a facilitator of these types of questions when we need to deal with processes that might go across business units? Really what we're saying here is there a mature center of excellence or COE team structure here? If there is, what we see is this wonderful type of virtuous circle. We see that center of excellence teams use consistent patterns to analyze problems, deploy solutions, and manage and refine those solutions over time. If we were to map this view back onto the toolkit, we would say the top right-hand corner this is where process mining, process discovery tools come into play. Identify the process, understand the process, and inform the design. As we look at the bottom right-hand corner, this is where we're going to be deploying the solution. We might be building it in a workflow or BPMN tool. We might be writing rules that are run by another program. We might be building RPA robots to manage some manual data entry tasks. And on the left-hand side, we're going to be using analytics and business intelligence tools and process mining tools as well to understand what the changes in the process we've done in the right-hand side of this graph are, understand if they're positive or negative, and then I find areas to improve the efficiency of those particular processes. And then these teams operating across the organization do this work continuously, specific to their subject matter expertise. There's no end to this process. It's a continuous, virtuous, to be a bit tongue-in-cheek cycle, where the analysis leads to the build and the build leads to the refining, which leads to more analysis, and so on and so forth. So to recap, we just reviewed and defined automation. Automation is the name given to the set of tools that are being focused on in the industry today to solve really tricky problems, not available to be solved by off-the-shelf solution. We deep dove on some of the technologies like business rule engines and process mining that our center of excellence teams are armed with to identify and solve the problems in their business. And we looked a bit at an automation strategy, which, just to boil it down, is just saying technology that is purchased without investment is likely to fail. We have to both find the right technologies and we have to invest in the structure and the structure, or as I was saying earlier, the supporting cast to make sure that those technology decisions are successful. So let's start talking a bit about some of the trends that I and the other leaders here at Decisions see. The first I'd like to talk to is about the changing relationship between IT and business. I have fancifully called this decentralization, for lack of a better word. So decentralization is the fact that the relationship between IT and business is changing. Business is now moving into more and more into the world of being a technology decision maker and not a consumer. So this didn't begin with COVID-19. but the shock of COVID-19 really exacerbated this trend, or really accelerated this trend. In March 2020, most of the world shuts down. Most of the world moves to remote work. IT in March 2020 wasn't a wonderfully efficient department that all of a sudden became underwater. IT was already underwater. The needs of the business are outpacing IT resources today. And so this has required business to get more directly involved in technology planning, and has started to modify the way we think about the role of the CIO in some of these decision making. As technology planning has changed, so has the distribution of people across our organizations. Today, there are more and more business technologists, business analysts, solution architects that report into business and do not report directly to IT. This new class of business technologists is growing in popularity over the last decade. And as we see this change, where business stakeholders are no longer just automation consumers, but they're active participants, IT has begun to leave software and other enterprise technology decisions to finance, marketing, sales, and the other departments that make up our organizations. IT is now turning its attention to core business strategies. CIOs are reporting that they continue to oversee data governance, compliance, and other high-level IT functions. But when it comes to what the day-to-day business application choices or approaches that business is selecting, they're moving into more of a facilitator and less of a gatekeeper. So in this new world of advisory CIOs, the demand for each business to own its automation future couldn't be greater. So look, we talked a bit about the change in the relationship between business and IT. I'd like to talk a bit about some of the expectation for scarcity and access to developer talent in the next decade. If we look at industry experts, they tell us that by 2030, there's going to be 85 million less workers than needed. And that accounts for about 11% of the global workforce. And this is expected to reduce future revenue growth by nearly $9 trillion in the next 8 years. If we focus that just on software development talent access, we can see that by 2026, there's expected to be 1.2 fewer software developers than there are need. And that's already in an industry that is first in attrition and is under significant wage growth over the last decade. So what does this mean for us, for people that are trying to solve hard problems using these tools? It just reinforces the fact that we have to engage our non-traditional development resources. We have to use low-code tools in creative ways to solve the problems that IT won't be able to solve for us in the future. I mean, today the access to developer talent is likely a tactical problem, and in the future, it appears to be a strategic risk. If our strategy for software development or business process optimization involves going back to the well and getting IT, who has a ever dwindling number of software developers, to build and maintain an ever growing set of software systems that we use to optimize our businesses, we're going to be in a bad place, right? We need to have a comprehensive strategy a comprehensive IT strategy that leverages these tools we're referring to as automation here to solve those problems. And the only way it can do that is to engage this growing set of technology users that are no longer reporting directly into the IT team. And lastly, for trends, I'd like to talk a little bit about what I think and what we think here about the future of RPA. Oftentimes we need to pick a horse to ride. What's the first automation tool that we're going to invest in? What are we going to hitch our wagon to? For the last number of years, RPA has been the cool kid on the block when it comes to discussions about automation. So RPA has been that poster child for some time and is expected to continue to grow. It's somewhere around $23 billion in the next 3 years. But if we look at the reporting and we break out software from service dollars, we can see that a majority of that growth is expected to be in service dollars and not in software. So most of the growth in RPA is in the implementation, is the vendor selling the implementation or is implementing their solution, and not in the growth of RPA itself as a technology. We can even see this in the stock performance of some of the major RPA vendors who are, even in the midst of a pandemic that was driving digital investment, and in many of these data entry jobs that RPA is wonderful at automating, could not be taken home. So even in the midst of a pandemic that was driving investment in digital tools or in automation tools, some of the major RPA vendors are down 70% since their IPOs. We can see the same thing in the way the analysts are starting to report on or talk about RPA. Gartner and Forrester were in love with RPA a few years ago. And then you can see if you've kept up with the reporting, you can see this change. And they started to realize some of the limitations of RPA, and they started wrapping it in things with like process mining and artificial intelligence. And they called this co-RPA. And then that process continued as they built the supporting cast of technologies. And now they've even walked away from treating RPA as the automation tool. And they're just using their words hyperautomation or automation fabric to talk about automation more generally. And so what does that mean? What that means is that RPA is moving from a platform to a feature. RPA is wonderful at solving the problems that it solves really well, but it is not going to be the solution that we use to automate all the tricky problems in our business. It needs to be thought of as a feature that is very good at a few things, but not as a platform for digital transformation. The automation toolkit and automation more generally itself is the platform that we need to focus on to think about digital transformation. So if we just wrap up our trends section here, we talked about how technology decision-making has been moving out of IT and into the business. We see some significant warning signs on the horizon for the access to traditional software development and how that informs our need to engage these non-traditional developers or these business technologists in creatively, and not just reporting on, but building solutions to the problems that we have today, as well as that some of the wind has been let out of the RPA sales over the last number of years. And we think the analysts agree that it is no longer the wonder kid on the automation block. So all of that being said, I'd like to spend just a few minutes and talk about some of the cool things that some of the decisions customers have been doing today with our tool. Like I said at the start of this presentation, I've had the really great fortune over the last 8 years to work with a number of customers in a number of businesses and in a number of industries. And every one of those customers had really tricky problems. Their processes were tricky because they had acquired 20 companies in the last 2 years, and each of which had its own HR programs, its own HR processes, and they needed to collapse those together or centralize those approvals in some way. They had a ton of manual processes that no one had found a good way to automate, or they just had significant strategic goals that no single piece of software could solve, and so they needed to basically pull together the automation toolkit, gather up a bunch of assistive technologies together, and build some significant bits of business process. As we think about the types of work that our customers do with decisions, we think about them in 3 main ways. Our customers mine their processes. They use process mining to understand the process as it is, not as they think it is, and inform the application of automations or applications. They automate the entire back office. They get rid of email and manual processes, and they apply business rules into those processes to reduce human interaction and automatically approve and do all of that that easy to formalize decision management type work. Or they pull bits and pieces of decisions out and they put them into best fit into an overall organization of a significant piece of business value that we would call an application. So they mine their processes, they automate the back office, and they build big, valuable pieces of business transformation that we would call applications. So Analogic is a provider of medical and security devices that has been a Decisions customer for the last 4 years. Analogic owns 50% of the scanning technology used in security hubs today. And they've had a small COE team of 3 people that over the last few years have built out a variety of back office automations and are currently working on a bigger process to help manage the installation of more scanning systems for the TSA in airports all over the country. Kinder Morgan is a provider of energy storage and transport solution to customers worldwide. In fact, 40% of natural gas consumed in the States moves through Kinder Morgan pipelines. And they've got a 5-person team of entry-level business analysts building out entire back office automation structure. And really neat is because of some of the pressure to prove out ROI, their team has programmatically built out dashboards, reporting, and analytics that are available on demand to their executive leadership, that they can count the number of cases processed, the time saved for each one, and roll that up into a live calculation for return on investment for their executive stakeholders to see. And then I'd like to pause here and talk a bit about Otis Elevators and their Otis One use case. So Otis Elevators is an elevator company that has 2 million elevators and escalators in the world, and they move 2 billion people a day. These are all over the world, and each elevator requires a significant amount of maintenance over its lifetime. And so what Otis Elevators did is they turned all of these elevators and these escalators into an Internet of Things array. Each elevator sends the heartbeat data. It sends a message that says, I'm good, I'm bad, I need help. And it sends these every 2 minutes into the cloud. And so what happens is all of these heartbeat messages get ingested by the cloud, and then Decisions pulls these messages out of the cloud and runs hundreds of business rules against the messages to confirm if there's a good or bad status code. If there's a bad status code, to look at the last 10 status codes and to see if there's been a bad status code. And so it looks for these instances of status codes that are close enough together. And then based on the calculation of that, it either ignores that particular heartbeat message and says there's nothing to do here, or it makes a call to workflow, which then assigns a task for the maintenance technician appropriate to that elevator to be alerted that proactive maintenance is required, and then to go and fulfill that maintenance request. So you've got 2 million elevators sending heartbeat messages every 2 minutes, and you have hundreds of rules running against every heartbeat message. And so you get hundreds of millions of transactions across billions of rows, or excuse me, billions of rules. Excuse me. If you were to look at the bottom of this chart, the Otis One program hits all of the highlights and some things we didn't even cover here, but you'll hear specifically mentioned by the analyst literature as fundamental to some of the future of automation. We've got Internet of Things. We've got edge computing, where we apply business logic at the point where the messages are consumed by the cloud. We have the cloud itself, of course. We have rules engines, and then we have workflows working in concert to process billions of rules, and to ensure that people are only engaged when they are needed, and that there is no requirement that people waste any time identifying what to work on. They can be alerted automatically of what to focus on and go do the work that they're best at. And the Otis One program, the Otis One process, manages the alerting of all of that infrastructure. So let's just lastly recap everything that we've talked about today before we open it up for questions. We defined what automation is. It's that diverse collection of technologies, all leveraging low code or no code to engage traditional development resources. We've discussed that automation strategy is really about investing in teams, given the mandate to go out there and automate everything. Those are the centers of excellence teams. We discussed what trends are driving the adoption of this type of thinking in these tools, that business is increasingly asserting itself in IT decision-making, that developer talent is becoming increasingly scarce, and that RPA is falling out of favor as the automation platform. And of course, we've discussed a few examples from some of our customers who are both automating everything in the back office and building significant bits of business process that transform their business more broadly. If you'd like to learn more about how Decisions can help you, I'd advise you to reach out to sales@decisions.com, schedule a demonstration, see what our technology is, see how our tool works, and connect with some of our automation experts to explore ways in which we can help you attack your trickiest problems. Well, thank you everyone for your time. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Again, my name is Will Petterson, and I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience here at Decisions. So have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.